Welcome. If you're a woman who has a sense that there's more out there for you, you're in the right place. I'm Whitney Baker, host of the Electric Ideas podcast. Somewhere along the line of work and kids, life carried on, but I lost track of my truth. I'm on a reflective journey, and that's what this podcast is all about. Each week, I interview a woman who is lighting her own path and offering others hope. Before our conversation ends, we'll share a reflective question for you to explore. Sometimes all we need is a jolt, a fresh idea, an aha moment that connects us to a sense of possibility. This, my friends, is what I call an electric idea. Welcome back to Electric Ideas. I'm your host, Whitney Baker, and I am delighted to have a very esteemed guest on the show today. Dr. Felice Gersh is a multi-award-winning physician with dual board certifications in OBGYN and integrative medicine. She is the founder and director of the Integrative Medical Group of Irvine, a practice that provides comprehensive healthcare for women by combining the best evidence-based therapies from conventional, naturopathic, and holistic medicine. She taught obstetrics and gynecology at Keck USC School of Medicine as an assistant clinical professor, and now she serves as an affiliate faculty member at the Fellowship in Integrative Medicine through the University of Arizona School of Medicine. She's also a prolific writer and sought-after lecturer who speaks globally on women's health and regularly publishes in peer-reviewed medical journals. Dr. Gersh is also best-selling author of the PCOS SOS series and her latest book called Menopause, 50 Things You Need to Know. Women have these gorgeous bodies that create life, and I am done with shame and confusion around our reproductive health and hormones. I am so grateful to have Dr. Gersh on the show today. I'm very confident that this is going to be an informative and empowering conversation for you. So let's get into it. Dr. Gersh, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for inviting me on. I'm excited to be here with you.
Me too. I want to dive right in because I am encouraged. I'm seeing more and more books come out that are on the topic of menopause, but I do think that many women are vastly unaware and undereducated about perimenopause. So I'm wondering if we could just start by laying a little groundwork of differentiating between the two.
Well, it's actually an arbitrary line. It's man-made. So it's a process. Once you get over this unfortunate choice of words of menopause and instead think of it as ovarian aging, or what we call senescence, the process of degradation and loss of oocytes, eggs in the ovary. And this occurs over years, okay? So by arbitrary definition, menopause is 12 consecutive months without any vaginal bleeding. Now I can't say the word period because if someone goes 9 months and then suddenly they have bleeding, I would never assume as a gynecologist that that means they suddenly started ovulating again after 9 months. I would assume that is some kind of abnormal bleeding. It could be from hormonal imbalance. It could be from a polyp. It could be even precancer or cancer of the uterine lining, the endometrium. It's not assumed that it's anything. You've got to figure it out. So once you just accept it's about ovarian aging, and this process takes years, then we just think of it as a continuum. So when does it start? Well, it starts at the very beginning of when you're born because you start losing eggs, like even in utero and when you're a fetus. But in terms of when we'll say the process really escalates, and it really mirrors fertility. So every woman knows that you're most fertile when you're like in your early 20s. And as you get older, and particularly as you get into your mid 30s and beyond, fertility declines. Well, we can think about that in terms of perimenopause. We have fertility, reproduction, and our beautiful life hormones, estradiol and progesterone made in the ovaries, testosterone, little separate. So they're like this, they're completely linked together. So they rise and fall together. So when your fertility goes down, your hormones are going down because your eggs are degrading. They're not, the quality is not as good and the numbers are less. So it's a process. So it starts when it starts. It could be the escalation for some women could be at age 30. For some, it's 35. Because what is the so-called range of normal menopause when 12 months, no bleeding. If we just go by that definition, it's anywhere from 45 to 55. That's a decade. That's all called normal. And then what about over 55? That's called late menopause. 40 up to 45 is called early menopause, and prior to 40 is called premature. So if you're in the early part of so-called normal menopause, say you're 46, well, the acceleration of your aging of your ovaries will occur about 10 years before that. So you're already having significant ovarian aging in your mid 30s. So you may already start having night sweats or hot flashes or moodiness or memory problems, palpitations, vaginal dryness, change in sex drive. So you can have starting these changes that we'll say the overt changes. That's like the ones you see or feel. They can start in your 30s. And what about early menopause? Like women who go into menopause and they're 42. So now we're talking like in the early 30s, they could already be having these overt symptoms, which can be completely uninterpreted properly by the patient, the woman herself, and her healthcare providers. And so it's like, oh, you're too young. No, you're not too young because if you're going to go into menopause and you're 42, 43, 44, you're going to start having overt symptoms of some degree, depends on, the severity, how your perceptions are in your 30s. So perimenopause is a process that occurs really starting a decade in terms of acceleration and super more acceleration 5 years before. And there's things that we mentioned that are, and we can go into more detail, the overt, the signs that you can see and feel. And then there's the covert, the ones you don't feel. One thing that is obvious, people look in the mirror, right? And they see changes in their skin. That's a very good clue right there.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, there's so much to go a little bit deeper in. So I just want to jump in because I do feel like just from talking to women in my circles that primary providers don't often discuss perimenopause. And I also think I've gotten the impression that there's quite a bit of shame. Like women don't want to bring up symptoms. Have you found that in your discussions with women who eventually make their way to someone like you who's informed in a different way?
Well, I'm sort of fortunate in that I have a self-selected group of patients who are assertive. But you're right, because it's just like if I don't bring up sexual function, often it won't come up. There are certain topics that maybe their mom didn't want to ever talk about, or it was considered shameful, right? So there are many women out there that anything that has to do with sex or reproduction or periods, they feel it's taboo and they feel embarrassed to bring it up with their doctors. Sometimes they'll bring it up with their friends. I always tell my patients, you can read anything that I can read now. It's not like there's a cabal here, it's all secret. But the reality is that everything is available in some form or fashion. And so there's no secret society of knowledge holders anymore. So every woman can access information. As much as it isn't even brought up by patients in many cases, the sad news is that the doctors, nurse practitioners, PAs, the physician associates, they have very little education in this whole process as well. We have to change this whole medical education after the really unfortunate Women's Health Initiative study that came out 23 years ago. All education seemed to shut down. Most research shut down, and the little research that was done often used the wrong hormone preparations, the wrong doses, and it just became sort of a big gap in medical education.
Yeah.
Medical schools and other institutions of higher learning about what happens in women's bodies.
Yeah.
So it's just luckily having a bit of a resurgence, but along with the resurgence is coming a lot of misinformation.
Yeah, and confusion. So I'm very glad that you're here to help set us straight. I want to take us back a little bit to this concept. I like the new language of ovarian aging because I think some women have this perception that all of a sudden things just drop. And I think, there's fluctuation over many, many years, as you've explained. Can you tell us about the key hormones that we are watching during this phase of life?
Well, there are the ones that are watched and the ones that should be watched. Exactly. So I'm glad you brought it up. It's so interesting. The path into menopause, the ultimate loss, we'll say, of ovarian function in terms of producing eggs, ovulation, and so on. That process is not the same in all women. So we mentioned that the age can be quite variable, and so can the journey. So in general, it's a very rocky road. The trajectory of estradiol production, the main one, and then its sidekick progesterone, is down. But along the path down, there can be some spikes up. So it's down and then jumping up and then down and jumping up. So it's like a bit of a crazy like roller coaster with always going down. So a lot of women will actually get accidentally pregnant during this time because they still have eggs. They're less viable, but they're not completely non functional. So, what happens is the brain has sensors for estrogen. And when the amount produced by the ovary is getting too low, it puts out its signals to the pituitary, which then is it's like the assistant to the brain. And then it puts out these hormones called gonadotropins, FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, and LH, luteinizing hormone. So when the ovary is producing less estrogen, the brain says, "Oh, ovary, make more estrogen, please." So the pituitary will then shoot up a higher amount of FSH and LH. So when that happens, oh, that's what we do for women when we're trying to do egg retrievals and we want to get a lot of eggs out, like for egg freezing or to make embryos for IVF. So it's a similar process. Suddenly you have all this signaling to the ovary, like make more estrogen. Well, that's involving getting the eggs activated. So you're kind of like, whoa, like we're waking up these eggs with this big surge of FSH and LH. And so what happens is sometimes you'll get an ovulation or two, so suddenly you're getting two eggs out. I mean, they could be, the last of the two almost. You're getting down to the bottom of the barrel, but suddenly you get twins. And so the biggest proliferation of fraternal twins is in perimenopausal women who have this surge kind of thing. So it's like amazing. So women like in their early 40s have higher rates of fraternal twins than any other age group. I never like there's no bells that go off when the very last egg is gone or no longer viable. We don't have like your nose turns red for a day or something like that. So we never know for sure. I mean, statistically, if you go months without any periods and your FSH level is high, you're not fertile. But if you're still having random periods like every 2 months or 3 months, we don't know, so I always say, still be careful unless twins are something you'd like to have. You never know. But it's a rocky road because when you get the surge with the FSH and then you make a lot of estrogen, you can have crazy high. That's the only time that I'll say there's so-called overproduction of estrogen from the ovary is in the perimenopause when you have these giant surges and the drop. Okay, that can trigger migraines and breast tenderness and mood swings. I mean, so it's really quite a thing, when women get these big surges and their estrogen goes up really high and then it plummets and then they suddenly have, oh, I'm having night sweats and hot flashes and palpitations. So it's a really interesting time of life, going through this. For some, it's so individual for every woman. So it's good to know what you could expect. We know that women who are healthy to begin with, like they have really great diets, they exercise, they're sleeping, they're controlling stress, they tend, as a general statement, to do better. They have fewer
Yeah.
symptoms. So prepare, ladies, prepare. If you're like 30 something, you're never too young to prepare for aging. Okay, always. So the healthier you are as you transition through this phase of life. So prepare, and start the health journey. Really, I mean, you should start it from, very beginning of life as much as you can, be in control, but really start exploring ways to optimize your health, as early as you can, because you will do better. you really will do better through this whole process.
That makes a lot of sense. Setting a good baseline for these changes. So the variables that are within your control, you are being mindful of. I want to ask you, because I think about women in their 40s, many of them, if they chose to have children and go that route, have kids at home, they might have ailing parents. Some of them are juggling a lot, and they could probably justify many of the mood and cognitive changes that are associated with perimenopause on any given week, like a little anxiety or can't remember that. When should we be concerned?
Well, this is actually a fact. The majority of women will have cognitive changes as they are transitioning. Let's talk, like you mentioned, mood. And this is a process that occurs throughout the perimenopause and then into the menopause. Say you never had any problems with anxiety or depression. As you transition into perimenopause and menopause, your risk of having a real clinical episode, having anxiety and or depression doubles just by being in that phase of life. And if you've had a prior issue like PMS, PMDD, postpartum depression, anxiety, depression, in other phases of your life, your risk goes up fourfold that you will have a really significant problem with anxiety and depression. And in fact, over 25% of women in their 40s are newly started on antidepressants in the US. And that's just the women who seek care. And of course, the problem is they're having fluctuations in their hormones and declining estradiol levels. Estradiol is anxiolytic, it reduces anxiety. It does it in a variety of ways. One is through the endocannabinoid system. It increases the production of anandamide, that's an endocannabinoid, and it binds to the receptors that are the same ones that THC, that is from cannabis. I mean, which cannabis, of course, is a plant, but a lot of people know that it can reduce anxiety. Well, our own natural, not the plant, I'm not promoting cannabis here. It just so that you know that our own natural production of this molecule, this endocannabinoid called anandamide, is increased in the brain in production of this calming agent, our own natural calming agent by estradiol. And so that's actually a big thing. And estradiol increases the function and production of serotonin, the neurotransmitter that is the feel good neurotransmitter, that one that is supposed to be increased by the SSRIs, the serotonin reuptake inhibitors like Prozac and Lexapro and Celexa, all those different drugs. And that's what our natural estradiol does. So if we supplement women, so I call giving hormones to women who are no longer making any. I use hormone replacement therapy because I am truly trying to replace the hormones of our younger years in a way that is aligned with nature, like biologically compatible with what we had when we were younger, like in our 20s. And when you're in the perimenopause, I call it hormonal supplementation because we're not replacing because you have some, it's just not enough or not right. So I'm adding to it. So I'm supplementing. So just like with thyroid, okay, if a woman has low thyroid, which by the way is another one of the hormones we should be watching out for when in the perimenopause, not and menopause, not just estradiol and progesterone. I'll tell you why in a sec. But when women have hypothyroidism, they get thyroid, right? That's what they watch their levels. The doctor orders a TSH, free T3, free T4, hopefully. And then, oh, it's too low. Then you get thyroid hormone. It doesn't mean that your thyroid hormone production is zero. Now, if you have your thyroid removed or destroyed by radioactivity as part of a treatment, like for Graves' disease or cancer or something like that, then you literally have no thyroid production of thyroid hormone at all. And then it's total replacement. But for most women, it's not replacement, it's supplementation. Your thyroid is producing too little. Well, that's how I see perimenopause. Why am I putting all this in a different basket? It's a hormone basket. We want to treat all our hormone insufficiencies in a similar manner. You don't have enough, you give it. It's like simple thinking, right? So you're not making enough of your hormones, then you give some to supplement it. And the other potential is that if you give some estradiol to women in the perimenopause, that this is not proven. So, but this is, I've seen it work, but it's not a proven thing. That if you give a certain amount of estradiol, you're not shutting down the ovaries. It's not like birth control pills where you're like literally taking the ovaries out of order altogether. No, you're supplementing, but it allows the brain sensors to always know there's a certain amount that is reasonable. So hopefully you won't have these giant ups and downs when the brain overshoots, like not enough, poof, and then it puts out all that FSH through the pituitary, and then the estradiol level goes shooting through the roof in the early stages of perimenopause. So hopefully you don't have that giant roller coaster because you have like a safety net of estradiol. So it never will go too high, it never will go too low. It's just like a little cushion there. And I found that works wonders for so many women. And it's not shutting down their ovaries. Their ovaries are still going to do what they're going to do. But hopefully, by telling the brain there's always a reasonable amount of estradiol present, you'll at least alleviate those giant ups and downs. In terms of estradiol and progesterone, I order a lot of menstrual mapping, which is using urine metabolites, and you can actually map out a menstrual cycle. So a woman in perimenopause can actually have regular cycles. They may change in terms of their number of days. Maybe they used to have 29 days and now it's 25 days. So they tend to shorten and then eventually they kind of lengthen. So the cycle may change, but it's still regular. Okay. And a lot of women, they still have a regular monthly period. But when you measure the hormones through their urine metabolites, you see the estradiol spike. That's what triggers ovulation. So a normal estradiol spike is, whoop, it's really big. So in these perimenopausal women, it's like a little blip. Your hormone production is really, really reduced. And unbeknownst to you, your vascular system is changing, your heart is changing, your brain is changing, your joints are changing, your bones are changing. Why are we letting this happen? Why would we just stand in the sidelines and let your body start to go through this degradation? We know that in the 5 years preceding the official menopause, there's significant amounts of cartilage that degrades, bone loss, changes in the brain, changes in the arteries, plaque developing, intima damage in the endothelial lining of arteries. Why would we just sit around and let this stuff happen? So, you do the supplementation. And it turns out that there are estrogen receptors on the thyroid gland, which is so important for metabolism as well. All these hormones are like linked in this beautiful interconnecting web of functionality. So when you don't have enough estradiol, what happens to thyroid? Well, you have estrogen receptors on the thyroid gland. So you don't have proper function of the thyroid gland. Also, estradiol is critical for the function of thyroid receptors. So what thyroid that you do make doesn't work right on the receptor without having adequate estradiol around. So you don't actually have the thyroid working right. And so many women, they read, Dr. Google, and they go in and they say, look, I have all the symptoms of low thyroid, but then the levels are in the reference range, right? And the TSH may be just the thyroid stimulating hormone, maybe just a little bit on the high side, but not way out of the range that a lot of doctors would treat in terms of like conventional approach. But yet they have all the symptoms. That's because the receptors aren't working properly. If the thyroid receptors aren't working properly, even if you are making a reasonably adequate amount of thyroid, it's not working properly. You're not going to get the proper response in the cells. So you have symptoms that are the same as having too low, because you need the hormone, but you need the receptor functioning too. And then it turns out that estradiol is critical for regulating the master clock that controls circadian rhythm, because everything is like on a timer. And when you don't have the right circadian rhythm, you have drifting. It's like you're living a life of jet lag. And most people know jet lag is not a good thing. You gain weight, you have mood problems, sleep problems, appetite dysregulation. All these things are bad. And you don't have proper production of your other very rhythmic hormone, cortisol. So you have dysregulation of your cortisol, your melatonin, and your immune system is very circadian. So you have immune dysregulation. These are all things you cannot see, but you may feel when you have problems with, like, I call it road rage without the road. It's like I just have like a low threshold to exploding with negative emotions. And, it's not fun for anybody. And that's because all of these things are now problematic here. Nothing is right. You're having cortisol dysregulation, you're having immune dysregulation that creates like low-lying inflammation. And then you get also, we know that the gut microbial population, the gut microbiome, is very dependent on having proper hormones. So when you have dysregulation of your hormones, you're going to have what we call leaky gut dysbiosis, the wrong microbes. And then you have improper stimulation also of the vagus nerve, because that also relies on estradiol. It's also influenced by the gut microbes and their fermentation products. Everything is such a complex interconnection. So you end up in a more sympathetic state, sympathetic as in stress, not, empathy. So instead of having parasympathetic and vagal tone, which is the calming state that you're naturally supposed to be, and they call like rest and digest, you're like, over exploding with stress, sympathetic output. So that makes you have more palpitations, vasoconstriction. You can start having labile blood pressure. So suddenly your blood pressure is high when you're upset. It doesn't take much to put you in this stressor state, which causes the stress response, which includes more rapid heartbeat, constriction of your arteries, more blood clotting propensity, more cortisol coming out, dysregulation of your bladder, getting like bladder urgency. That's when women have like urge incontinence and they have to go pee all the time and their gut isn't working right. You can see where this is leading. It's complex, and doctors are not trained in any of this. And so they're overwhelmed and they just start giving out drugs. Before you know it, the poor women are on 5 different drugs.
Hey, it's Whitney Baker, your podcast host and founder of Electric Ideas, just jumping into this episode because I have something special to share. Many of my clients carry this constant feeling of being backlogged, like there's more they should be doing. And the things that bring them joy, they tend to keep pushing those off. In addition, sometimes when they finally carve out time to spend with the people they love the most, they often feel drained and distracted and disconnected, or like they're just going through the motions. And this is exactly why I created 5 days to less stress, more satisfaction. This is a simple yet powerful self-guided mini course that follows my signature flow. I help women get still through soulful guided meditations. Then we open up space for reflection so you can really tap into yourself and that inner knowing and have a moment to press pause on all the demands of life and look at the big picture. I also layer in practices that help you feel light and joyful and free, because it's a lot to be a woman in this high demanding world. And adulthood has a way of stripping those feelings from us. And unfortunately, for many of us, they don't just reappear. We have to intentionally cultivate this feeling of aliveness and joy and freedom in our lives. I want you to go from feeling like your days are planned to feeling like your days are designed. That's a subtle but beautiful shift. And if it speaks to you, I encourage you to check out 5 Days to Less Stress, More Satisfaction. I've priced this course at just $47 because I want it to be as accessible as possible. And I want every woman who feels called to do this type of work to be able to snag this today and just begin. It's a no-brainer investment in yourself, and you can get instant access through the link in my show notes. And I will be honest, if you've had meaningful takeaways from the nearly 140 episodes of this podcast, or from my content on Instagram at @WhitneyWoman, or my newsletter, purchasing this course is also a way just to give me feedback, to raise your hand saying, I like this, I want more of this, and to show your support. As a small business owner, creative, and mother, I continue to ask the universe to use me to help me be of service. So your show of support by purchasing this program really does go a long way. If you have any questions or feedback or need help accessing the course, you can just reach out to me anytime. I'd love to hear from you via email. My email is whitney@myelectricideas.com. Okay, let's get back to this incredible conversation with Dr. Gersh. Yeah. First of all, thank you for that lesson. I mean, we have to get into it. It's all interconnected is the other thing. And so I think it's tricky. And I think women can just feel overwhelmed and almost give up, just be like, oh, this is just part of getting and neither of us want that. So if you had a daughter who was in her 40s and starting to feel some of these symptoms escalate a little bit, what advice would you give her?
Well, I start hormones. I would do menstrual mapping. I would start hormone supplementation. I would, of course, check thyroid. That's really important. I would check inflammation markers. I would check nutrients because if your gut isn't working right, you may not absorb. It's not just what you eat, it's what gets absorbed, what gets digested properly and into your bloodstream. So, I would recommend getting very thorough blood testing for all these different things and, start on some hormone supplementation and emphasize eating I call it the magical foods that exist, all the plants, because all the plants have these magical ingredients called polyphenols, the magic sauce of these plants. And they include a lot of phytoestrogen. So a lot of the superfoods, a lot of the supplements that people take, they're actually phytoestrogens. It's amazing. Our nature, our world of nature gave us foods that can dramatically reduce inflammation, that can help maintain the function of our mitochondria that create energy, control the cell cycle so that yucky cells die when they're supposed to die and get rejuvenated when they are still viable. All of that is controlled by estradiol, but no matter what we do, we're going to age. So we need all the help. Giving hormones, I call it necessary, but not sufficient. You still have to do all the other things to help increase vagal tone, to regulate our stress response. That is so important. So much of conventional medicine has ignored the stress response and what that does to the body, and we really do understand it. So I recommend some form of mind-body practice, whether it's guided meditation. We do biofeedback to help people see their heart rate variability. It could be progressive relaxation. It could be guided meditation. It could be prayer meditation. There's many different types of meditation. It could be anything that increases vagal tone, a vagus nerve stimulator, cold plunges. Now that's not my favorite, but but one of my favorites is laughter yoga, like laughing. Laughing actually is very calming. It's like really amazingly healthy to laugh. That's why I'd say don't watch the really sad stories. Okay, that's not what you need. Go to the stupid comedies, go to the improv, get a joke book and just, tell jokes and just laugh like soundtrack. That's what laughter yoga is. Just do mimes and mimicking, funny things and so on. Take nature walks, going out in nature, watch the sunset, making sure you do proper, like they call it sleep hygiene, like turn off the devices, do mindfulness before you go to sleep, dim the lights. Sometimes it's good to do light therapy. I recommend light boxes to help people to regulate their master clock as it's sort of what we call drifting. So you don't have this problem with circadian rhythm dysfunction, which also includes, which we didn't touch on, dysregulation of the appetite. So a lot of women, they start having binging and cravings and night eating and weight gain, even when they're not eating more because they lose their mitochondrial function. It's declining and they don't burn fat as well. And so you want to do everything to reduce stress, to have your circadian rhythm properly regulated. And fitness is so important. I always say exercise is probably the single best thing you can do to regulate everything. They've done studies comparing antidepressants and exercise, right? Exercise improves mitochondrial function, so you burn fat better. It helps you sleep better. It's like there's nothing that exercise doesn't improve. I think it's worthwhile getting a qualified trainer to at least get you started so you don't have injuries, because I see so many people, they say, I'm going to go out and jog, and but they ruin their knees in the first weekend. It's like, that's not our goal. So, it's good to start with someone who actually knows how to help you You don't have to have a trainer forever. Just get a few training sessions so that you know how to use equipment at a gym, or you can use bands at home. There's many things you can do on your own. And I love yoga. It keeps your joints more flexible. All these weird positions that you get into, they help to keep things from stiffening. And yoga breathing, so all the breath work is great. And doing things to improve detoxification. So doing like saunas is great. And doing like a regular, like we call it reset or like detox, eating lots of cruciferous vegetables, because the last thing you want is a body full of xenoestrogens, the chemicals in our world that are interfering with our normal hormone function. It's a huge problem. Try to eat lots and lots of whole foods, the nature food, organic food. And the goal, no one's going to achieve this, but it's a good goal, like 9 cups of vegetables measured raw, okay? And like 3 cups of fruit. I also create mottos. One motto I have is don't be afraid of fruit. I have people, they say, I'm not going to eat any fruit. It'll give me diabetes. I can assure you that no one has diabetes because they ate too many grapes or apples or peaches or pears. That isn't the problem. That's not what's causing diabetes, okay? It's eating chemicals, processed food, high fructose corn syrup, sedentary lifestyle, eating at the wrong times of day. It's, all that terrible ultra processed food is really the instigator. It's not an apple. Okay, it's not an apple. And fruit is as sweet as anything you should ever eat. People they have cravings for sugar. A lot of perimenopausal women have that. So you know what? Bake an apple with cinnamon and put in a few walnuts, okay? And that is as sweet as you should make anything. It's just natural fruit. And you should eat your fruit with your meals, okay? Not like a snack. In fact, snacks are not a good idea. Eat 3 meals a day. Try to have 13 hours of fasting. This is what I tell all my patients in their 40s, transitional, 30s even. Try to have at least 13 hours between dinner and breakfast, and try to have breakfast within 2 hours of awakening. A lot of people are doing the time restricted eating. That is not good, because your intestinal tract, your insulin is also circadian. It's on a timer too. And your intestines work best in the first half of the day. You are most insulin sensitive, like your insulin works the best in the first half of the day. So they've done studies on this. If you eat the exact same food and you eat most of it in the first half of the day, you can lose weight. If you eat most of it at the end of the day and into the evening, you will gain weight. It's just not the calories. Although I'm not saying calories are irrelevant, but it's how you metabolize. It's how you use it. And you will have fewer excursions, higher levels of insulin and blood sugar if you eat dessert for breakfast. If you got to have dessert, just do like I do. Last night I had a nice little dish of cut up papaya. That is so delicious. That's not going to give me diabetes. Sometimes I'll have half a grapefruit. I like to have the little fruit serving at the end of my meal. Nothing wrong with that, okay? That is not why we have a healthcare crisis, okay? Because people ate a dish of papaya. That's not it, okay? But don't have like lots of snacks. If you have to have a snack for some reason, make it a fat, okay? So it won't increase your blood sugar and your insulin. So like what's a good fat? You could have like 3 macadamia nuts, a little handful of olives, a few bites of avocado, things like that. And then a big mug of green tea or herbal tea or oolong tea. And you know what? Most of the time, you'll be fine, because 99%, because a lot of times all you need is to slow down, rest, and hydrate. So these are all the things that I share, and it can change. It's like life changing. Try to go to bed not later than 11 p.m. You need that 2 a.m. surge of melatonin. It's really, really important. And if you go to bed at midnight, it's not going to happen. So try not to go to bed after 11. 10 is even better if you're willing to do that. If you have to get up at 4 in the morning, then move everything earlier. But if you can exercise in the morning, you're more likely to lose weight than if you exercise later in the day. But I'll just take exercise any time of day. I can't be too picky. So anything you can do to move, try not to sit, like stand up, walk around every hour, and laugh a lot. Like I said, I can't underemphasize how wonderful it is for your autonomic nervous system, which regulates everything, that we don't think about, which is most everything. It will just laughing. And it's not always easy to laugh, because we live in a very serious time. So whatever you have to do to laugh and be outside and enjoy company and love and so on will make your body so much healthier through this transitional time and the rest of your life, which a lot of women, half their life is now in menopause.
Yeah, that's what's coming up for me. And I really appreciate all of these lifestyle strategies for managing this time of life. And I appreciate that you brought attention to stress. I'm a meditation teacher, and I feel like I've encountered that many women are worried about what they eat, worried about movement, worried about sleep, and they're stressed and they're just not doing anything to address or mitigate that. I know we are coming up on time. I always end my episodes with an opportunity for reflection. So, for women who are thinking about ovarian aging, what's one question women could be asking themselves more?
Well, since it's very probable that about half your life will be spent without your innate ovarian function, think about what brings you joy in life. And what I am trying to do is something that has never been done before, and that is to uncouple. I mentioned earlier that our fertility and reproductive capabilities are intimately combined with these vital hormones from our ovaries. And I'm trying to uncouple that. So the fertility goes away, it's not coming back, but I keep the hormones as biologically similar as I can by giving them as exogenous hormones. So think about how you can live the rest of your life with this uncoupling where you can still get hormones, the fertility is gone. So, what do you want? Think about what will bring you joy. What is your purpose? It's not going to be to make new babies. It might be to help raise them if you have grandkids and so on. So it's not like children and babies cannot be part of your life anymore, but they're not going to come from inside of you. That chapter of your life is done, but you have this giant new future, this new uncharted time of going through life as a menopausal woman. So you can look at it as doomsday because all these bad things can happen, or you can look at it as an opportunity to be healthy by doing all the things we just talked about for the last while, not being afraid of hormones, not being afraid of fruit, not being afraid of the future, and embrace your new chapter of life and decide what you want it to be. You are the script writer of your future. Embrace it and be the person you want to be.
That's a beautiful place to end. Thank you. Dr. Gersh, where can people find you and follow you and support your amazing work?
Well, I'm an old-fashioned doctor. I'm actually in my office. So I see patients in my, old-fashioned brick and mortar office in Irvine, California. That's in the Orange County, Southern California. And I see patients there like pretty much 5 days a week. I can do telemedicine. There are certain like little glitches if you're not a California resident, but it can be all worked out. So we can work things through. And I also have a pretty active YouTube channel and Instagram lives I do most week. So, you can follow me on social media. I really appreciate that. I'm really trying to educate as much as I can. And I'm always a work in progress too, like all of you. I'm not stuck, so you have to follow me because I'm always evolving too in my understanding and looking at the science and so on to try to explain in easy to understand language, like what's happening and then what you can do about it. So help me to accomplish my mission by following me.
I definitely know we can do that. So thank you so very much for being here today. I'm so glad you joined me today. If you're looking for more, feel free to connect with me on Instagram at @WhitneyWoman. And if you enjoyed the show, I invite you to support me by leaving a review or sharing it with a friend. Hope you have an inspired day.